Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 League of Legends College Championship. I, Dylan MLBD, will be your host, guiding you through the top 32 and top 16 matches, alongside TJ Bjorklund. TJ, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good. It's always exciting to watch collegiate because you never know what you're going to get, as well as the fact you have so many students who maybe have different interests and just there's so many different personalities in collegiate that you
I
never
love it.
know what you're going to get. It's just so exciting.
I completely feel you on that, man. Collegiate is a special place. You know, the competition's always really high, but the personalities is what really makes it the best. And that's not all, you guys. We are joined for today's first match by RBM from Michigan State University. RBM is their starting jungler, and he's actually playing later today, so he's only joining us for this first series. RBM, how you feeling about the collegiate championship, and how you feeling just in general about being on the broadcast?
Yeah, I love being on the desk every time in amateur and collegiate, but I feel like collegiate desk is gonna be way more fun because collegiate's way more fun than amateur. Like it's a fiesta all the time. It's a content show. I love it so much. Feeling good going into my match. Obviously, so good I can come on the desk before it and still be fine. Um,
You just
Overall, it should be a really good time.
Yeah, no need for that extra, practice, no need for that extra game planning. He's already
Nah,
ready.
we're
He's
chilling.
already ready. We'll touch on that again later on in this desk segment, but for now, let's throw it over actually to take a look at the top 32 bracket. We're going to start with the top half of the bracket, what some people have been dubbing, the death side of the bracket. A lot of very strong teams here. TJ, let's hear some of your thoughts on this side of the bracket.
So it was definitely a bracket for sure. Twitter's been going crazy over it. I'm most excited to watch U of M and U of T. I think this is going to be a super interesting game because U of T is kind of like a gang of friends that likes to hang out, but they're all like high ranked players. Whereas UMich is like super sweating what's going on here in the college championships. I have heard rumors that they will mental boom if they do not make it out, so that can always be exciting. Um, and it is important to note that Toronto actually did make it to the round of 8 last year. They beat Purdue, which was a good team, and so they're definitely not to be discounted. Though what I'm super excited for is Aquinas versus Winthrop, and that's because obviously Winthrop was our champions last year. Unfortunately, they've just lost their AD carry, so I'm wondering how they perform now with the sub. But kind of interestingly, Aquinas is like one of the hardest workers, is kind of like how I like to call them. They make a bunch of content. They're always kind of like public and they put in the effort. So it'll be kind of a fun series to watch to see. Outside of those, I think the left side of the bracket for at least the first 2 rounds shouldn't really have any like upsets or like major games. After that, we start to get into a crazy fiasco though of who is going to make it out of this left side.
Yeah, the round of 16 matchups, we're going to touch on that later, but they can be very, very spicy. Some even, people have said, sometimes the finals matchups, two of the best teams in collegiate could be happening in the round of 16 or the round of 18. But we're going to have to see how that unfolds at the end of the day. Looking over at the other side of the bracket, the bottom half of the bracket, RBM, I know that you have some thoughts being on that half of the bracket yourself. So what do you think about these matchups?
Yeah, I'll take the Mickey Mouse side of the bracket up here. This is the side where everyone is like, how is this even legal to have this many noobs on one side? So I'll be farming it all the way to the top two. But the games that I really think are fun in top 32, I think SLU York is going to be a really great game. SLU has players that did really well in amateur this year. Cozy Shroud and Doxa especially played really, really, really well. And York themselves as a whole university did really well in amateur. But SLU was actually struggling a lot in collegiate. They got stomped by me. They got stomped by UMich. So they got a lot to prove that they're not the complete noobs. And Bethany Converse, CVU in the bottom, is going to be another really fun one. Bethany has having another roster swap, putting their starting 80 carry top lane. So that could make them a little weaker and make that series a little bit more fun.
Yeah, on a point RBM just said in terms of SLU having really good players, they do have near 5 challenger players, really well-known names, but I do think they struggle kind of in working as a team sometimes. Like we played them in our series, and they didn't look too impressive. So RBM, I'm maybe rooting for an underdog here in Converse.
Oh man, that could definitely happen, but we'll have to see. That would be one of the biggest shocks of the entire tournament if that actually ended up happening. SLU is a team that many people have going very deep. Well, Now that we've talked about both sides of the bracket, the Mickey Mouse half of the bracket, as RBM dubbed it, let's take a look at today's schedule specifically. There are some very exciting matchups. Top 32 always has some really special stuff in store. And there are 3 streams where the action is happening on. Right now on twitch.tv/academy, that's where we are. Obviously, we're covering UBuffalo versus VESPA. We will then be covering some other matches later today. But for this first round of games, we're looking at Bay State versus Maris Red Foxes over on Unified Live, and Maryville versus Malloy over on Unified 2. Any thoughts on those games, guys?
Yeah, I went to Marist High School, so it's kind of exciting to see the Marist College. They are kind of loosely affiliated, competing here in the top bracket. Actually, on the other scene, the C stream, I am excited to watch Converse Bethany because I think that's gonna be one of the closest games that's kind of aired today, where we actually aren't 100% sure who's going to win.
Yep, and I'm being on Unified 2 later today, 8 p.m. EST. So I'm obviously excited to be there for that one.
Yeah.
That'll be a good time, and I'll definitely put up a good show for the lads. And I think the Michigan U of T, I'm definitely gonna be watching that one really closely. I have a lot of friends at U of M, so it should be really interesting, and a lot of great series tomorrow as well.
Yeah, there are really, really good games today. You know, Converse is one of those teams that I know people have been talking about. Bethany is a team that played very well last year, but they've had some changes, both on the staff and the player level. So we're going to have to see if these teams can, live up to their reputation that they built last year, and if they can keep up strong performances in this 2022 College League of Legends Championship. So let's shift the focus to today's matchup happening on this stream, the twitch.tv/academy stream. We have UBuffalo going up against VESPA. This has the potential to be a very, very exciting first series because UBuffalo is a team that made it to the top 8 last year. But, I mean, there have been a couple of changes. They have 3 remaining players, so we're going to have to see how they perform. Let's start out with talking about UBuffalo first. What are your thoughts on them, RBM?
UBuffalo seems like a pretty fun team. Obviously, they make top 8. They have one really, really, really good player in You Look So Charming, name changed. So he should be really good. He's also role swapping as well. Glee is like super fun because you always have like 4 people at the role swap just to get your best roster together, and like that's what we're working with. And UBuffalo is a team like that, so I'm really excited, and I like UBuffalo because they're a team like us. But this is their first real time that they're actually going to play a team since they had a cupcake conference. And I mean, it's still a South team, so it's not like a real team yet. But I mean, we're getting to like some competition for them, so we get to see how good Buffalo is and if they can make another deep run just like last year.
Yeah, Buffalo holds a special place in my heart. Having played at Miami University for 2 years on their esports team, we got knocked out 2 years in a row by Buffalo. They were always that team that was just gatekeeping us barely from making it to the top 32 championship, and they are definitely a formidable team, and they've kept, in my opinion, their 2 best pieces in Canas and also their AD carry. Although Canas has role swapped to the mid lane, so we're going to have to keep our eye on that, see maybe what sort of champion pool he's built up over the course of this season. But let's switch gears and talk about VESPA. TJ, I know you've done some research into the guys over on VESPA and their team as a whole. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it should be pretty interesting because they actually have a role swap. So they do have their jungler playing mid lane, who is a Rengar one trick. So they have swapped throughout the course of the season playing roles. We might see an Ivan Rengar today. That can be extremely exciting. It is impossible to win mid 2v2 against that thing. It is illegal, and the things that Rengar players do just shouldn't be allowed in the game. We do know that Goto is a high ranked player. We see him all the time in Challenger solo queue, GM solo queue. Another exciting pick to look out for is Tryndamere, another champion that just causes absolute chaos for teams that maybe aren't as organized or even just having a slip of judgment. And then finally, it is important to know that Vespa actually was a vote-in team. They didn't make it throughout their conference. And I think that is something to note, whereas Buffalo did. So.
Yeah, and like being a voting team, as I was a voting team last year, since we lost to some gold teams speedrunning, I think it's like gives you like a lot to like build up into. Where like, yeah, we definitely belonged here. We messed up. Some bad things happen. Sometimes it is what it is. So you get that second chance, and you feel like you really gotta pull through with this new second chance that you get. So I'm really excited for them. Hopefully they can pull off an upset here and give a good show.
Yeah, I like that perspective coming from a former Voden team. I could definitely see how that sort of lights a fire under you that you need to perform, right? There was a whole panel of people who decided that you belong in the top 32 of teams, and honestly, UBuffalo is not that bad of a draw. They are not an unbeatable team. They're not one of these world beater collegiate teams, so I definitely think that VESPA has a bigger shot than a lot of people are giving them credit for. But speaking of how good UBuffalo can be, let's take a look at their awesome state-of-the-art esports arena that they've actually been playing in. This picture's pretty awesome, guys.
Must be nice. It must be nice to have your university support you, know you exist, care about your existence. Pretty cool stuff. Glad that esports is growing. Please, Michigan State University, care about me. I'm pretty good at this game. So are my teammates. This is my pitch.
It's all right. Not as good as Illinois Wesleyans, of course, but it's okay.
Yeah, I'm a little bit salty because the year that I left, there was a massive overhaul of Miami University's esports center, and it's now moved into the student center, and it's really big and really cool and big glass windows. So I'm happy that Buffalo gets a shot with having that cool of an arena.
Having a gaming hub on campus is actually like a game changer because people just come in and be like, "Oh, what's this?" Like,
Oh
"Hey, let's
yeah.
have some fun." You meet new people, maybe you find a walk-on that maybe you didn't previously know of. It's just such a really important thing to a campus, and I hope to see more administrations building facilities like that soon.
Yeah, for sure. It's something very special, and they're playing their games from there today, so maybe that'll give them the boost that takes them over the top. Gentlemen, we have a few minutes left before we throw it over to the casters, which leaves us with just enough time for my favorite part, predictions. I think we'll see how much we differ, but let's start with you, TJ. How are you feeling with this series?
I think that um, I think that it's possible for games to be taken by Vespa. I think that it's more likely than not that UBuffalo will take a 2-0. But I am excited to see whenever you're in this underdog position, what do you come up with? Again, I mentioned like an Ivan Rengar. What secret pick have they prepared? Because it's very easy to take games off with something that you've never seen before. Like what happens then? He just plays, let's say hypothetically, Malphite support. How do you prepare against that? You really can't. So you can throw some wrenches in the cog like that, and I'd like to see Vespa pull out something because then I think it maybe swings more in their favor to come up with some wins.
Yeah,
As
I mean that's a great point, and that's one of the special things about collegiate. I know we talked about that last year a lot when you and I did the analyst test together. Like, how do some of these lower ranked teams make upset wins? Well, it's through creative strategies, creative picks, and we talked about Toronto earlier, and they're a team that I remember last year their mid laner would role swap to support. He'd play things like Swain bot lane, and it's these champs that like not a lot of people were playing that gave him the advantage. RBM, how are you feeling about today's series?
I love how TJ had to throw in Malphite somehow, right there.
I had to do it. I had to do it.
I'm taking you Buffalo 2-0 as well. But I think best play, I think that like the glory of collegiate is anyone can beat anyone all the time. Like there are very few teams that you just load into. You're like, yeah, we're gonna get stomped. Like, so it's so much fun. I think Goto is really good. The jungler, I've seen him in solo queue a lot. I know he likes to play carry junglers as well, so he can always be a difference maker. And having double role swappers in mid lane, it's always interesting. Sometimes someone just griefs it, but having some cheese prepared is always really nice. MSU loves to have our unique picks that people hate the scribbles for. So I think having those things ready is super, super useful, especially in these best of threes. But I will take you Buffalo 2-0. I think the player gap's a little bit too much. Canas is kind of a beast and has been a beast for a long time. So it should be interesting, though. It should be fun games.
Yeah, so we've got 2-0 for TJ, we've got 2-0 for RBM, and I'm not going anywhere else. I'm sticking right with you guys. I think it's going to be 2-0 for UBuffalo as well, because having played against that team for 2 freaking years, I know how good these guys can be. They kept their really, really strong AD carry Riku, who I believe his name changed. They've got Canas, and sure, he's not in the top lane anymore, but he's in the mid lane, which, in my opinion, is probably a more impactful role, especially in collegiate, right? He could actually just 1v9 games. So I'm very excited to see how it is going to pan out. But gentlemen, that is it from us. Our work on the desk here is done. Let's throw it over to our wonderful, amazing casters, Grapes and Rebel Fox, to get us started with our first match of the 2022 League of Legends College Championship. Guys, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Oh, had the shades on early on because it's about to get hot and heavy here in the collegiate championships. We got a bracket back there, and some of those picks have got to be filled in starting right now between the University of Buffalo and VESPA. Welcome everybody to the caster desk. My name is Grapes, joined alongside Rebel Fox. Rebel, I mean, this is an exciting series. I know that all the analyst desk members put that 2-0 prediction, but I'm hoping we get to see 3 games.
Grapes, the vibes are immaculate from you today. I have to be quite honest. I would want nothing else for the start of collegiate top 32 because it's been a very long season. We've seen a bunch of teams have very, very high progression through a lot of this. I'm excited to be able to talk about all of them in as much detail as possible. And you've hit the nail on the head with what you're doing right now. You got the hand-drawn bracket, you got the hand-drawn pictures, you got the headband. We are in for an exciting day of games starting off from just game number 1 here.
Yeah, and I know it's not March Madness because it's a different month, but maybe April Absurdity, finding the Kings of Spring. I mean, there's a lot of different, phrases that we can throw out here, but that's kind of the beauty here of collegiate esports. Anything can happen. We've seen a lot of these teams make big runs in previous years, and one of them specifically is playing right now in the University of Buffalo, making that top 8 run, trying to defend their sort of title here after taking that first seed in the ESC.
Yeah, last year, obviously, they had that kind of interesting 3-way tie, which led to Northeastern making it into the bracket, and they came in as a vote-in through a lot of the council that had come through and been able to vote on a bunch of the teams that necessarily need to come in. And Buffalo made that run to top 8, kind of proving, that not only can vote-in teams kind of make it to that point in the tournament without being from a major region, but the fact that they're that competitive just showed why Buffalo deserved to be there in the first place. And they made very few changes to the roster, only having upgraded. They absolutely smashed their way through the ESC this year. And so they're coming back with a vengeance and an attempt to kind of even build upon that top 8 finish that they had in the previous season.
Yeah, and as we head into the draft, that's kind of the narrative that we wanted to push here. How UBuffalo is, the champions of one of those smaller collegiate conferences. On the other side, Virginia Tech or VESPA is actually also a voting team, being the 4th seed from the South. And that's kind of the difference here between, some of the not as top teams in some of the major conferences versus a team that really went undefeated throughout one of their minor conference titles and runs throughout the season. So we're into the draft right now. VESPA will be starting off on blue side to start things off. And as we take a look at the rosters here, Rebel, the first thing that we wanted to point out specifically was the decisions that they made here, and especially towards the top side of the map.
Yeah, for a good amount of the season, VESPA was playing a different top laner named Swaggy. And Swaggy was, for the most part, playing a bunch of carry-type champions in the top lane. I think it's difficult when you're playing against a team that's as well-rounded as Buffalo. Every single position plays incredibly well across the board. You're not going to find a ton of very significant laning advantages. And so today, VESPA must feel as though it's better to have Butterfan, and who tends to play more of the lane stalling, more of the tank-type champions, lower resource types, in order to put that into kind of their mid-jungle duo where that typically goes. Especially into GoTo, who's the person from VESPA that we're really keeping our eyes on to be in that contest up against Buffalo.
Yeah, definitely so. I think the jungle matchup here is definitely one to take a look at, especially, as you said, on the side of VESPA. Headed into the draft to start things off, we see that Rengar ban on the Buffalo side, and that is a point that the desk was bringing up earlier at the start of the broadcast. FutureSelf, the mid laner, plays a lot of Rengar, and they have been known to go for some of the mid swap, with maybe swapping over to the mid lane. So it is very interesting to see that Rengar targeted ban very early on, and we'll see if that ends up being a factor throughout the series.
The more standard this game plays out for Buffalo, the better. So not only is the Rengar an incredible champion for VESPA, but also being able to have that mid-jungle swap between the two is something incredibly valuable that Buffalo wants to be able to remove from the table as fast as possible. Because again, they are willing to take individual lane states, they're willing to take a 5-on-5 team fight, they're a more well-constructed roster, I think, from top to bottom, in terms of what performance they've been able to show for the majority of the year. Not to say that VESPA is necessarily bad, but VESPA is going to have to get a little bit more creative with how they attack Buffalo at the beginning of the game to get the game rolling, and Rengar is one of the picks that can absolutely do that for them.
Yeah, and even though, VESPA is a team from the South Conference, a conference with a lot of really strong teams, specifically University of St. Thomas come to mind, their road to get to the top 32 was not an easy one. Again, they were a voting team. They lost to UT Austin in the third place match in the conference, and also even dropped a couple of games earlier on in the season. So, just in terms of how this roster was set up and how they ended up getting here, a little bit of a harder road, which is why we're kind of, favoring Buffalo maybe here throughout this first game.
VESPA's got some strength to them. There's nothing about that. They have to overcome a challenge. I like that our desk talked about the fact that on any given day, collegiate teams can beat the majority of other, if not every single other collegiate team in any given circumstance. And VESPA, having a year's worth of experience, there's a lot of value. Talking to a bunch of the teams, especially those who came from conferences that weren't north, south, east, west, they talked to me about how it was always a little bit more difficult in order to find themselves in a position where they were getting really consistent competition at the highest possible level of collegiate. Not to say that these regions necessarily are significantly worse, just that the level of competition tends to be a little bit lower in some of the partner conferences. And so when it comes to teams like Buffalo or Bay State is another really big one that comes to mind, they found ways to go out and about and try to get into like amateur spaces and practice and such. And Buffalo might fall victim to that a little bit because we didn't see them take those kind of big step ups into some of the other collegiate tournaments, some of the amateur space. Instead, they're just self-contained to the ESC. Or like you said, Vespa's got a lot of experience. They played UST during the split. They played UT Austin. They actually beat UT Dallas walking in, which was one of the favorites, I think, to get out of the Southern Conference in general with some of the roster that they've got. So enough names that have been checked off the list for Vespa to be able to challenge in some of the early stages. Maybe that experience is going to be helpful for them here today.
It's a very similar situation that you see in like college basketball, when you have the mid-major champions in some of the lesser conferences, get some higher seeds in the tournament that then maybe fizzle out to some other teams in conferences like the Big Ten and the Big 12 that have a lot of stronger competition. And that's kind of the situation that we have here in the current collegiate setup. The ESC, as you said, maybe not the strongest conference. UBuffalo only dropping one single map throughout the entire regular season. And so, when you consider how that situation ended up unfolding for Buffalo, even though they did make top 8, they're retaining a lot of their players. For a lot of people, maybe they're not entirely sure how strong they're going to be coming up against some of these big names from the South.
I mean, when you lose MLBD from the entire region, it just goes to garbage, I guess, is the case we're trying to make here. Once he left, I mean, there's just no competition left. Buffalo gets to run everybody inside of that. There was competition at least a little bit, but Buffalo I think they lost one game and it was regular season, and it was in their final week when they had already confirmed the #1 seed, which is kind of incredible. That's a really insane split from UBuffalo to be able to have that kind of a split as well. And not just regular season, that's regular season and playoffs losing, having had one loss in general, which is incredible to think about. We see that the draft is kind of caught back up to where we were previously, so just to touch on some things again, the Rengar, but the Tryndamere also very popular for FutureSelf, who is, himself a little bit of off-rolling inside of the mid lane, a very talented player, but has played a lot of the Tryndamere this season, and it's clear Buffalo's done a little bit of the due diligence necessary to make sure that comfort's not going to be on the table.
Yeah, I think Tryndamere is going to be a pretty highly regarded pick on both sides of this draft, and so very unsurprisingly taken away in this first phase. What is also unsurprising is a Jinx lock-in on the B1, a champion that has been very, very highly regarded in the meta towards that bottom side. So Blamed One going to be picking that one up. It's a solid carry option down in the bot side for Vespa. On the other side, an interesting set of events here. That's a Senna lock-in. Might be going towards Kyriu, might be going towards Nyeong. Don't really know just yet.
And it's interesting because we talked about beforehand that we were expecting the bottom lane to be a bit more quiet. I know, with the experience that MLBD has, our wonderful host, he talked about Riku or Kyriu here, the ADC for UBuffalo, being incredibly talented. Oftentimes not necessarily showing up just purely in the laning phase. He's not finding a bunch of these incredible advantages. He's not, pushing for 3-4 kills. But this setup is one that is an absolute brick to deal with if you are against the Jinx, because you've got range to work with, poke to work with. You now have a frontliner with the Tahm Kench sitting in front of you. The Senna Tahm Kench is like the old school, the OG classic of having the farming Tahm Kench alongside the Senna that makes them very, very difficult to kill. So while Vespa has set themselves up for a scaling bot lane, Blamed One has been very good, leads the team in kills. When it comes to some of the later game, is kind of the crux of the team fighting here, and Vespa set up for it pretty well. You have to think that Kyriu with this Senna pick is going to be able to lock that lane completely out of contention.
Yeah, and Kyriu is also a bot laner that really can, become a huge factor come some of these later game team fights. And on a champion that scales as well as the Senna, always something to look out for, especially on this Buffalo team that always likes to go for these team fights. On the other side, responding here for Vespa, it'll be Butterfan locking in that Ornn, and that's the kind of the difference in terms of the roster that Vespa has set up. When you compare Swaggy to Butterfan, Butterfan tends to play more tanks, so it looks like going up against Emprisonner, who has been very strong, wants to go a little bit safer here with that front line.
Nothing shocking in the slightest about this. We've seen the Aatrox get kind of bumped up recently in some of the play and some of the counter matchups that you would necessarily see it in, but in Prisoner specifically has played this Aatrox a number of times. He ran through most of the playoff bracket. I think it was 4 of the 6 games that they played was on this Aatrox and went crazy on it. He's a very good Aatrox player. So now taking that test into the soft lane of Butterfan, where he's got the Ornn, incredibly powerful champion right now, able to team fight and scale very effectively. It's a test of Imprisoner's ability to be able to push into Butterfan. This was the whole reason that they brought him in instead of Swaggy, was to try to get something that's able to salvage this laning phase and play for a little bit later. later. I think that's a test against Buffalo's team fighting that VESPA is willing to take here, which is curious because I think Buffalo's got a really good team fighting kind of team altogether. Their coordination is very high. A lot of their players returning from the previous split. So it's a bit of a statement here in our first game of Collegiate 2022 for VESPA to come out here with a very well-rounded team fighting type composition that plans to scale against Buffalo.
Yeah, and that's sort of the expectations that we had going into this series here, Rebel, that VESPA maybe wanted to spice things up a little bit, throw maybe a sort of sucker punch against a Buffalo team that might have been considered the favorites. But for now, it is seeming like they want to just kind of match style for style, tit for tat in some of these high-scaling team fighting comps. And as we take a look at the second ban phase, a lot of target towards that mid lane, that Viego taken away from GoTo as well. Expecting to see maybe GoTo get that really highly prized, advantageous jungle matchup as one of the main carries for this team.
Ooh, busting out the Lillia just as fast as possible. This was interesting because I expected if they were going to do something like this that they'd really pinch off the jungle pool as much as possible, but only fearing the Viego here. You have things like the Volibear that are available for GoTo if you want, but GoTo has a tendency to play more carry-oriented type junglers, things like the Graves that also is not available because that was banned out in the first phase. And now against the Lillia that has this incredible power farming potential. I mean, you got like Hecarim on the board, but that's been nerfed pretty heavily. You don't really have a response. They need a little more time to think about what jungle pick they're going to grab. Now mid counter is also up in the air for Canos, who's again this returning powerhouse player, the crux of everything that Buffalo has built up to this point, and kind of one of the big reasons that this organization has done so well in Collegiate over the last 2 years. You show him Viktor early, you give him a chance to kind of come up with a counter pick. They go to Lee Sin. I don't think it's a bad choice necessarily inside of this one, but that's not the most creative response in the entire world to the Lillia.
Oh.
This is a little bit more creative, something that we saw
Okay.
when Lillia was really in meta, and I know one of our deskers is specifically going to love that pickup for sure.
Oh yeah, RBM will be smiling, I bet, on the desk afterwards in this game. GoTo picking up the Kha'Zix to match up against Derty's Lillia. I mean, this is an exciting jungle match, we gotta say, Rebel.
I will say that perhaps he won't be smiling. He might be grimacing just a little bit if GoTo doesn't have a good performance on that.
True. It's a double-edged sword, to say the
It
least.
truly is, yes. This is GoTo's chance to prove to one of the best Kha'Zixes inside of North America that he is worthy of taking the champion, especially into a counter matchup when he gets to see the Lily. And I said outright, like, Lee Sin is an okay blanket pick, but it's not exactly what you want when you see something as polarizing as the Lillia thrown into a composition like this, and then they go for something themselves a little bit polarizing. Playing around GoTo is the strategy we anticipated them kind of employing as we walked into this series, and it seems like that's going to be the possibility here. They have got a lot of scaling to work with. I do worry about some of the pushing power between the mid and the top lane when it comes to controlling that wave to begin the game to help support the Kha'Zix, but at minimum, it's the idea behind being able to help support GoTo in the jungle versus jungle matchup to attack early against Buffalo.
Yeah, and Kha'Zix is a jungler that does have a lot of damage in the early game, but even compared to things like the Lee Sin, the Volibear, the Jin Zhao, maybe not as much early game agency in terms of having that hard crowd control that you can really do wonders with in terms of setting up ganks. And so if you are GoTo, have to be maybe a little bit more creative in how these setups end up going. And again, this VESPA team really relies on GoTo from getting ahead, and if he does get ahead, is on a champion like the Kha'Zix that can do a whole lot.
Now, on the opposite side, of course, also, like, Buffalo controls quite a bit in teamfight. You have ways to start off teamfights with not only Aatrox in a mid-fight, you got Tahm, Kench. The biggest thing is that Lillia is the thing that's really kicking off their fights for them. They've got a lot of range to work with, though. Lillia's abilities, especially, like, the Marble to be able to use on the E, but then Corki rockets and Senna's range getting incredibly massive as well. It tests the positioning of the Viktor and the Jinx, even though those are two champions with themselves range. It's a very rare opportunity that Buffalo has to outrange those champions in a poke war to start things off, which means that it's really VESPA that's got a lot of the kind of immediate engage that's necessary to kick off a fight against Buffalo, where you've got the Ornn and you've got the Nautilus as two champions to try to force your way into the Corki, into the Senna, into the backline. But kiting backwards, again, for Buffalo is such an easy feat. You've got Aatrox to do that, you got Lillia to do that, Corki's got his own wheel, and then you've got Tahm, Kench behind as well to eat somebody and kind of jump them off. So it's a lot of difficulty. VESPA's got a difficult composition, I think, to full manage in a game like this, where you want to support Kha'Zix to begin with. A team fight, you have a lot of engage tools, but the enemy team has a lot of ways to kite backwards from engagement, which means that they're playing with very kind of on very fine edges here with how this is going to operate against Buffalo.
Yeah, and again, Vespa is this team that, you know, we were expecting to kind of go for something a little bit more unorthodox, like this Kha'Zix. And while the rest of the team is pretty standard in terms of just wanting to team fight, having that assassin in the mix always makes things both A, more interesting, and B, maybe a little bit harder to execute. And I think Buffalo really set themselves up. They have a very high control team composition, a lot of safety in that Senna, Tahm, Kench down in the bottom lane. And again, as you said, a lot of poke, a lot of late game damage. And so this is definitely a composition that Buffalo, you know, is probably very happy with considering the circumstances. They're one of the top team fighting teams here in the collegiate space, and so it's up to Vespa, I think, to get some early agency, get some kills early onto Goto in order for them to try and steal away a game here in this best of 3.
I also find Buffalo is kind of hard to play against early. What you do have is Corki, who can at least match some of what Viktor can bring in the mid lane. If you get Viktor very early hex core upgrades, all of a sudden you can kind of take the advantage against the Corki in the wave care advantage, and then of course you can support your Kha'Zix a lot better than what you normally would when the package is down, which is a very nice thing for the side of Vespa. But outside of that, it feels like they don't really win the pushing war in like anywhere specifically so heavily that there's not going to be support for Derty or a place to go for Derty to be able to gank, especially on top side. Whereas for Goto, I mean, you're talking about like a Viktor in the mid lane doesn't have exactly the greatest gank setup. You do have Nautilus to work with. Maybe moving Nautilus around the map alongside the Kha'Zix is the strategy you wish to employ, but then you're leaving a Senna alone on the bottom side of the map. You're unlocking, maybe Senna to go roaming and leaving the Tahm, Kench to farm to their own devices and allowing that bottom lane to scale up a lot more against Jinx, who will have to play a bit more of a backseat role. So again, there's these very fine margins of advantage that Vespa could technically work with, but Buffalo has just a sound composition all throughout that makes them difficult to work with. So I'm curious where this breaking point is for Vespa. Where are they looking to attack to begin with? I think defensive top lane, making sure Ornn is going to be fine on their own, and playing into Viktor a lot to make sure that that wave clears there so you can support that mid-jungle combination, attacking in the river as much as possible. Is probably where you're going to start things off.
Yeah, and seeing FutureSelf get a lot of early support would definitely be, I think, valued here for the side of Vespa. I mean, FutureSelf, again, we mentioned, plays a lot of their Rengar, being maybe a sort of jungle player throughout the most part in solo queue and stuff like that. And so now being, you know, in the mid lane in a little bit more of an uncomfortable situation up against Kenos, who is also a very, very strong mid laner. So I think getting FutureSelf ahead will definitely be valuable for them as we are on to the Rift for game number 1. Vespa on your blue side, UBuffalo on the red.
I'm very excited, Grapes, to kick off.
Oh, man.
CLOL Championships 2022. I also like that we're kicking it off together because we've casted a couple times for Maryville, and we've been able to cover their Northern Conference. I know that RBM is going to be supporting that. I know that our whole desk is basically Northern Conference between our analysts. So we have a lot of that representation here. But we get teams from all over the country for very good reason. You can see the kind of development that's been happening even over just the last couple of years, where Buffalo, 2 years of really, really solid play have led to them getting new facilities, where, you know, Vespa is one of these teams that's on the verge of being able to kind of break into next levels. They talked about their coach being very transcendent and having a fantastic coaching staff to put them in the right position for success as well. And that kind of growth is always nice. This top 32 gets to show off a lot of what these teams have been able to do over the course of the entire season. And it all culminates into one final position. So this is a chance to finally kind of show what you've been able to accomplish over the year and prove what you're going to be doing with additional resources in the coming years as well.
Yeah, there's no sort of interleague play, so to speak, in the collegiate regular season. The only time that these conferences get to match up against each other is right now in the CLOL Top 32. And again, this is the story. South Conference versus, partner conference here in the ESC for Buffalo. And it'll be a tough task, I think, for Vespa, the 4th seed, to try and overcome, as our analyst desk suggested. But definitely excited to see if they can do so. Are both junglers starting on their bot sides? I mean, are you expecting full clears for both of these? Definitely on the Lillia, I would say.
Yeah, the Lillia should be able to do it very, very quickly and get to top lane. And again, I think top lane is also a position where you want to set Butterfan into a good position, because if Empowerment gets ahead, all of a sudden the Ornn is both put behind and also the Aatrox is ahead, which is not what you want, because Emprisonner has just been insane on that champion for the majority of the splits. And combine that with Derty wants to make sure that that place is kind of taken care of. So Goto, predicting that that's going to be the pathing, actually goes to the exact same thing himself, may be able to generate some kind of 2v2 up there where he gets to interact with Lillia. You can see bottom side, Nyeong having to burn the flash very quickly, a byproduct of them pushing into blame point and then getting pushed back out, taking too much damage, not wanting to get hooked, just kind of getting pushed back a little bit. Senna, of course, is not farming, so the wave clear advantage should go to the Jinx very quickly in a game like this.
Yeah, hitting level 2 first as a Nautilus is always really, really a good thing to do in that lane. As you saw there, already burning that summoner spell out of Nyeong. And the wave as you said, will probably continue to push into the Buffalo turret. And already we see a great hook coming in from Izumi. Ignite popped, piercing light to heal up a little bit as well, but now the root will come back. Don't think there's enough to trade back, but Blame One's going to flash forward. Will get exhausted on the other side by Nyeong, and now the autos can start to run through. More Summoner's Burn. That's a heal on the Blame One as well. We got 7 Sums down in the bot lane, but nobody has died. Meanwhile, up in the top side, Goto trying to go for an invade on the Krugs. Derty forced to pop the smite for a little bit of extra HP. Now hitting level 4. Here comes Emprisonner as well. Goto trying to flash away, waiting for FutureSelf to try to get a little bit of extra support. He will get dragged right back in with the chains, and that is first blood to Buffalo to start things off.
First blood for the entire CLO event, Grapes. Let's go.
Woo!
We expected anticipation. We anticipated, I guess, an interaction on the top side. Goto goes for a very quick invade for the Krug camp, thinking he's going to be able to find Derty on their own, kind of on their own, and the Aatrox is able to get there just in time. You can see this was the position. Goto had skipped his entire top side just to come and immediately attack Derty. But how difficult is it to stick to this Lillia? He had the red buff and used the lead to get over top of the wall. So once the Krugs got in the way, really difficult, and the Regan power from the Emprisonner right here, being able to roam the push into the Ornn meant that he was free to do something like this. And while you did miss a couple of the Qs to kick things off, the flash Q to slow him down was all that was going to be necessary. And first blood going onto the Lillia means it's even harder now for Goto to be able to manage anything like this. The Summoners fell down, the Lillia being able to full clear, the Kha'Zix not off to a good foot.
And, I respect the attempt there from Goto. He's on this VESPA team that, again, we were talking about, wants to make some early plays, spice things up a little bit in the early game. And on the Kha'Zix, you do have maybe a little bit of extra assassination power going for an invade onto Derty. Unfortunately, the support from Buffalo was just a little bit too strong. Really great roam on the other side by Emprisonner to make sure that kill ended up going through. So it is Buffalo getting out to an early lead, which is definitely not a good sign for VESPA.
Yeah, and it actually prompts now for Derty to begin the counter-invading process. You can see into the Raptor camp off the back of that reset is tracking the jungle coming through from the Kha'Zix to make sure that those camps get taken away and that he gets punished properly for going for this immediate invade. And yes, you're going to snag a couple of those tiny Raptors away if you go to, but not able to get away fast enough. Derty just going to be able to steal that away. It looks like actually Derty didn't get many of those. It might have been just like 1 or 2 or something like that. But one way or another, again, the Lillia feels a lot more confident in a game like this after getting the first blood, after now having lucidity boots as well, to begin ganking for lanes with this Predator. And that's the interaction that I think that Kha'Zix can't really match, is that Lillia ganking for these lanes. They've got CC in both top and bot to work with, so maybe that's a position. Maybe they could start to get Aatrox ahead, the bottom lane a little bit ahead, and start working towards really progressing this map forward.
Yeah, and the clear speed for Derty was already quick on the Lillia, but now just having that extra kill accelerates the pathing even more throughout this early game. Lillia is one of the fastest clearers here in the game if you can get those blooming glow heals off right. And as you see in the gold graph right now, with that first blood already in a really good spot to continue to push the pace for Buffalo. And they don't even need to push the pace. I mean, they have a ton of scaling. They have this safe composition that, VESPA's going to be forced to try to engage into. And so if you just continue to play in this sort of controlled fashion, things likely will be going well.
Now, the use of the bot lane push, I think, is really, really good from VESPA. They clearly know that there are ways to attack this game. And one of them is, of course, pushing power to the bottom side means they should have dragon access. And even further, normally Canas would be on even footing in terms of the mid lane farm and everything else with FutureSelf. I'm not sure what happened, but he's down 20 CS right now, being kind of pushed off by the early poke with Viktor. The scaling is always there for Corki. Corki's a very powerful champion. That's been shown time and time again. So it's not surprising to see Derty. Here he is on the gank in his mid lane.
No lifting Lullaby just yet, but procking a whole lot of damage with the watch out. Eep stuck under the gravity well. Chaos Storm to follow as well. Don't think that Foss Bomb would have been enough to secure the kill, but either way, FutureSelf forced off of that wave.
Yeah, not flashing, though, importantly. There was nothing burnt from either side. No flash from Derty and no flash from FutureSelf. It was just a little bit of poking to make sure that Canas has better control of this wave, maybe trying to force out FutureSelf into a back. But he's not going to leave because he's got the hover from Go-To. So that means that, of course, the Kha'Zix is going to be able to stay, force things out. The wave is in a perfect position right now as well for that to come through. I was thinking they were going to try to force a gank through this wave, but Go-To decides against it because he ran onto a ward. So instead, FutureSelf just captures the remnants of this. Free back timer for the Corki. We'll get back to the wave a little bit quicker. Should have that package timer up in just a little bit of time to work with. So eventually that roam will come through. But down 20 CS to the Viktor. FutureSelf doing very well for themselves here in the early parts of the game up against the opposing scaling that Canas brings.
And that's a bit of a surprise from multiple angles. From both, how we were talking about how Canas is a very strong mid laner versus FutureSelf, who had to role swap to the start of the season, and also just in terms of how this matchup likes to go. You mentioned how Corki is able to normally get control over the waves, at least early on, before some of the upgrades to the Hexwork come through. So seeing FutureSelf already ahead this early on to the game is definitely a good sign here for VESPA.
Or at least, I suppose, FutureSelf having the amount of control that he has had over top of Canas is a little bit shocking. That got a little tumultuous for Derty there for a second. Had to burn the smite just to make, or burn the smite. Got the shield off. It was down to 40 health when the Q came out from Emprisonner. Thankfully, yeah, it was very, very close. And he's kept up in farm as well with the Lillia. So Derty in a position that they are level 6 now alongside GoTo. So both of them now matching in that position. So basically, the only advantage in the game really was just that first blood coming through from the Lillia, bottom and top lane, mostly on even footing. So it's just that 120 CS lead coming out in the mid lane here for FutureSelf for the side of VESPA. But now you're seeing GoTo in a position going for the Rift Herald. Oh, Derty by the
On
mid
the other
lane.
side, yeah. FutureSelf might be in a bit of trouble. Has a Lilting Lullaby procced on top of him. The Eve
damage.
comes through. Blooming blows, and the final burn will secure the deal. Derty picking up his second kill of the game.
Extremely well played from Derty. Right there, not walking into topside river where there was a bunch of vision, instead pushing this advantage in the mid lane, trying to dig Canas out of a little bit of a hole to begin this one, and did so successfully. Finds the flash, finds the kill, and is going to get this wave pushed underneath that GoTo is going to have to grab when GoTo really wanted to go to the Rift Herald, really wanted to solo that. It's a very fast process for the Kha'Zix with all the single target damage, being able to take the eye, and now this is on the reverse foot because you've got the push from Corki, you've got the Aatrox in the top lane, the Ornn had just backed, and so they find this timer where it looks like that objective is going to be taken away. So that's more gold into the pocket of Buffalo if they're able to snag it up over top. And really, what are you to do right now if you're VESPA? You could try to challenge, but
yeah,
they don't have the perfect early game champions to be able to do so with.
Looks like they want to try, though. Emprisonner flashes, but straight into the Ornn Horn as well. World Ender has been popped, and GoTo will secure the first kill of the fight. Now in a numbers advantage, VESPA might want to push the pace. A lot of damage, though, coming out from Canas early on. Rift Herald very low. Smite's going to come through, secured by Derty. Shadow comes through from the Senna ultimate, and Derty's in a whole lot of trouble. But through the wall, he will flash in after picking up the kill onto GoTo, and now Canas is going to flash away as well. He will survive. So it looks like after all is said and done, just a 1-for-1. Buffalo get the Herald as well, in a very good spot after that.
So initially, no ultimate from Derty, I think actually is what prompted this from VESPA. And the fact that Emprisonner walked into the topside jungle looking for GoTo's approach, trying to find him out as fast as possible, and getting caught out with the Ornn ultimate, led to a position where they felt like they could go in on this. Look at this, like Emprisonner just gets caught out, there's not much you can do. Ornn ultimate catches him, and he just dies before he comes out. But the damage from Derty, and also Canas through this choke point, look at that.
Yeah.
Health bar's too low, really to contest. They just go for the Rift Herald shot here. Derty's able to snag it up, not to mention the Senna shield that ends up coming through helps them kind of re-engage off the back of this one. And while the roam from Izumi is a little bit late to this process, what were you to do at Buffalo? They end up snagging the one kill in exchange for one, and the Rift Herald going over. Just perfect play coming out from Buffalo to salvage that just off the back of, again, positioning in the river, being able to punish them on their approach.
Yeah, and in terms of impact the bot lane paid in that regard, it was Izumi who had to roam all the way up. You know, Kyriu just threw out the Dawning Shadow and was still able to pick up a lot of the XP, a lot of the souls, and had Nyeong farming alongside with him. So, all in all, in terms of just pressure, Buffalo won out on that trade hand in hand. They didn't, use as much resources towards their bottom side, went 1-for-1, and still got the Rift Herald. And now you have Derty, who has 3 kills at this point. Rift Herald also in his pocket, so can go to try to impact the map in any of these lanes, try to break open one of these first turrets as well. And with that pressure, it is just going to be Buffalo starting up this Infernal Dragon.
Getting this Lillia going, again, incredibly difficult now to push the advantage that the Kha'Zix should have in the one-on-one when it comes to just picking out the Lillia individually. So that kind of, dream is a little bit down. And again, Kha'Zix doesn't have perfect lanes to go ganking for to kick things off because the gank setup just isn't there. The Rift Herald also getting taken off the board, as well as the second dragon in the game going to Buffalo. This is really, really hard to deal with. Vespa's now in a position where they can't go for a dragon stacking kind of like play for a team fight condition. They got gold down, and now to bottom lane, they're trying to spike up Nyeong and Kyriu.
Canas uses the package not to go for the dive, but instead just to accelerate the pushing in of the wave. Shelly will be spawned in here by Derty. It'll get 2 of those remaining plates, and with the amount of manpower that Buffalo have, you assume that this tower will go down. First brick over to Buffalo, and they might try to push the pace a little bit even more here. Derty trying to start up these invade onto the Krugs. GoTo goes for the smite, but he might get punished for this. The missile dive coming forward. He will be able to leap away. And I think that's all she wrote for this engage.
So at first I was a little bit hesitant to talk about Canas's package usage right there because I thought it wasn't great. But in an ideal world, actually I'm going to save that because Goto's getting kind of run down in the jungle. Looks like they're going to leave. They're just going to take his red buff. And what are you to do? Because you're already half health right now. The best you can do is like a smite steal, but he doesn't have it right now.
Watch Izumi with a hex flash. He's going to go over here, landing that depth charge, knocking up 3. But the health bars are already low onto the back line here for VESPA. Looting Lullaby pops onto 2. The Dawning Shadow comes in as well. Big shields onto the Buffalo side. The Devour will land in onto Derty. but the first casualty will go on to Goto, making it a 1-for-1 as Kyriu falls, but FutureSelf is the next victim. He will be going down to the likes of Kha'Zix. Izumi forced to flash away, and Buffalo go 2-for-1 on the engage.
And this initial play came out from Buffalo because I think they were anticipating that a Viktor teleport could really turn that play underneath the tower, and they don't want to give gold back. So it kicks off with this kind of package play, and then they go in, they find a Q onto Goto. This is the biggest thing. They lose the red buff, Izumi goes aggressive, and look at the positioning where you're at. You have no way for Goto to get into this fight. FutureSelf gets here pretty early, and they're able to get that. This was the biggest point. Nyeong being able to grab out the Lillia, and now who's your target? You go into Kyriu, but Kha'Zix comes from the top side of the fight. You're already down too much health, and there's just no position for you to find yourself in. Buffalo actually did a really good job shuffling who is taking damage, or my apologies, VESPA did a really good job shuffling who is taking damage over the course of that fight, but ultimately, like, they just didn't have the ability to test into the Tahm Kench like that. Having this big, bulky front line, being able to pull somebody out with that ultimate, ultimately too much for them to overcome, and Buffalo wins a massive engagement in the opposing jungle, being able to push their willpower into their enemies very effectively to kick off this game.
And that's the sort of safety that the Buffalo composition provides, having the Dawning Shadow to shield up so many people, the Devour to save Derty from going down early on in that fight. And that's just kind of the amount of team fighting power that this Buffalo team has, especially as we go later and later on into this game. If you think the scaling is good now, just wait until we get to 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, if it even ends up getting to that state. And, you know, Kha'Zix also having a very solid fight in there as well. You know, he's now actually, I think we saw the gold graph on the left earlier, the most fed member here in this game, despite, you know, falling behind a little bit to FutureSelf in the early laning phase. So we're seeing him being able to pick up the pace again, working towards that Luden's Tempest and working towards having a whole lot more power, especially in the poke department.
We talked about Buffalo having a bunch of coordination, how difficult VESPA's early game needed to be, and how fragile that it was to try to find some aggression. So going down early in your jungle position, which is supposed to be your winning, and giving gold back to an advantageous matchup in the mid lane where, like, the Viktor was doing well into the Corki, kind of bodes poorly for VESPA's future in this game. Well, yes, they're pretty good, proficient team fighters. They've got champions that scale well into that range. You've seen just how easy it is for Buffalo to play out these situations effectively. They're very talented, and they know how to work through their way through kind of all these progressions that happen within team fights. And now, I mean, they're pushing this advantage further. Derty didn't get shut down, which was huge for gold denial, but also keeping him up. It means that this Lillia is just insanely powerful. The Leandry's with the Lucidity boost just means that you win every engagement that you take this quickly inside of a game. And it means that, you know, Derty just kind of gets to abuse anywhere on the map that they choose. Right there, shoving out top lane, making sure that, you know, Emprisonner is going to start feeling the love of having a very powerful Lillia on your side, being able to freely take some tower damage, shove in waves, make sure the Ornn isn't around all that much.
And we keep bringing up how hard it is for VESPA to try and go for these engages, because that's what their composition wants to do at the end of the day. Might find one here, though, as Kha'Zix might be under fire here, but the teleport will be matched by Emprisonner. And now Kha'Zix actually going onto the aggressive. Rocket misses, but the World Ender has been popped. Goto gonna try to make this a 2-for-2, going for the assassination, and will secure Kha'Zix's life. Dawning Shadow was just a little bit late, and Emprisonner now has to fight this 1v2. Chaos Storm goes out. He's going to try to dash away, but the invisibility from Goto is here. He's flashing forward for the extra kill, and FutureSelf goes for a flash, and maybe a little bit over-aggressive. Rocket goes wide as Kyriu joins the fight. It's just 1-for-0 in favor of VESPA.
First really advantageous position now coming out from VESPA, where they look for a gank. They're trying to abuse the fact that there's a single member underneath of a tower with this Kha'Zix. We actually see Bladeborn dodges the Q. That's humongous.
Really
the ultimate would have dropped him almost certainly. So great flash from Bladeborn saves him in that situation. Here's the reinforce.
Yeah, watch the re-engage. Goto already taken down very, very low, but Izumi wants to fight. Izumi wants to dance, and that's the shutdown. Going in onto Bladeborn, and the double for the Rocket all the way downtown. Nyeong will fall again, and that is a big fight there for VESPA. They pick up 2 kills, and the Dragon has spawned. It will be the second Hex Tech going over.
That was incredible because Buffalo was communicating so well right there for the defense of Nyeong to make sure that the Tahm Kench could get out, because they were saying, oh, I've got the Devour, I've got the Devour. There's the
Package
play.
coming through, big damage, but the Dragon already secured. Goto going to try to go for an assassination before falling, and Izumi now forced to run for the hills as well. Tons of rockets and tons of poke are available on this UBuffalo team as Izumi falls. FutureSelf and Bladeborn looks like they will be able to try and escape. Emprisonner does have that World Ender, but doesn't want to use that movement speed to try and chase them down. Dragon secure, but it is at the cost of 2 lives of VESPA.
Goodness gracious. VESPA losing two members right there on the back end of the Dragon, a bit of a salvage for Buffalo because they were in a rough situation. Again, that mid lane play was so impactful because it looked like it was a defense that Buffalo was going to make, but one way or another was leading to VESPA having the first move. Now Derty back to top lane to continue the punishment of the Lillia all around the map.
Butterfan has the flash, but here comes that lilting lullaby. Gonna be canceled by the Bella's breath, but it actually still sends Butterfan forward. The watch out Eep lands the sweet spot, and Nyeong will secure the kill.
See enough. Again, right now the entire game plan for Buffalo is just to make sure that Derty is somewhere or Kha'Zix is somewhere, because if you've got one of those two, they are so powerful that it's impossible for VESPA to really deal with. The one salvage that they did get is that a bunch of these kills in the last couple of minutes went on to blame one for their big team fight that's coming through. They punished with the long-range engagement. They were able to deny the access of the ultimate from the Tahm Kench onto Derty underneath that mid tower, but it meant that they burnt so much that it was difficult for them to kind of take a full-on engagement around the dragons. Well, they grabbed that. They did go over a couple more kills, but at least you can see their team fighting is kind of, it's there. VESPA's not, bidding on nothing right now. They understand what they need to do with their composition. They're getting gold into the right place to make sure that the Jinx has it, that the Viktor has it, the members that are going to be able to carry the late game kind of team fight rather than the Kha'Zix. That transition has been smooth enough for VESPA that it's clear that they understood that was the case from earlier on in the game. It's a question of whether or not Buffalo, again, their coordination is clearly on point and they're sitting on a 4K gold advantage, whether that's all enough.
Oh, Hexflex over. Derty gonna get hit up by that hook, but here comes the re-engage. Eita will be locked in here and taken down by Kyriu. Go to force to jump away. Ornn will come out, only knocking up the Tahm Kench. And it looks like the rest of UBuffalo will be able to escape. They just pick up one kill onto the support. Nothing really else to take alongside the map. Top side, though, FutureSelf going after Kha'Zix. No flash available. The death ray barely hits. The corrupting pot is ticking, but Kha'Zix will survive.
Oh, just barely living out that situation right there. Corrupting pot versus corrupting top. Pick rate. But the Kha'Zix is there.
Go to. He doesn't have the flash. He has the invisibility. Misses out on the W, but there's the Q. Go to securing that kill. Donnie Shadow once again just a little bit too late. So another kill into the heart of the Kha'Zix, but the punish here for Buffalo. They're playing the macro well, spotting Rift Herald into this mid lane. Gonna look to break open this inner turret. Kyriu has a lot of damage here with the autos. Shelly trying to get the damage done, and they finally will secure the objective.
They do. Well played right there from Buffalo, being able to respond to the topside pressure. FutureSelf, again, just pulling solo lane gold as much as possible. They're trying to make sure that the two big carries remain safe. Nice 1v1 against Kha'Zix, where you're able to still abuse the Corki despite some of the early games starting to head into Kha'Zix, starting to get onto some of the major itemization. They're going to kick off the Baron with Go-To this quickly in the game. The redeploy is only just now coming out from Buffalo. They are very late to see this. There's no vision.
Oh,
this is what I was confused about.
No! Ah!
Okay, what literally had to happen right there is almost certainly what just had to happen.
That's why you don't solo Baron at 20 minutes as a Kha'Zix?
I mean, I don't think he was trying to solo. I think the call was that the Jinx could show up, and then they'd have Jinx and Nautilus could frontline for a bit. He was already not full health, so I was a little bit skeptical about that. Just the start of jumping into the pit and waiting that long and taking that much damage. But they just bailed on that as soon as he showed up anyway. So a little questionable right there. And again, VESPA showing some signs of life. They've got members in the right place. I think Blamed one we didn't mention all that much, or we didn't talk about all that much, is having the most kills on this team, being this late game insurance policy for VESPA, being in a great position inside of this game to be able to help out in that late game if they're really relying on the team fight when they've got the Ornn and the engagement that they do. But again, the real question mark is how do you deal with some of the range and the scaling that comes through from Buffalo, because they're the ones with the advantage at the moment.
Yeah, you think of, a Jinx as a hyper carry that also has a decent amount of range with the rockets, but you're going up against a Senna and a Corki who outrange this Jinx, and that's kind of what we were talking about in terms of this draft, how it might be a little bit harder for Blamed One and the rest of VESPA to play these fights out just due to the nature of the composition that Buffalo set up. Unfortunately, it was a little bit of a pause. I don't know if it was directly related to the Baron take / execute that ended up happening on the VESPA side, but again, I'm going to try to resolve that issue as soon as possible because, I mean, this is already such a great way to kick off the collegiate season here, Rebel.
Yeah, very, very competitive game number one. Our round of 32, I mean, there are games that feel very, very competitive, games that sometimes that don't necessarily feel very competitive when you've got the top of the top teams. This is one of the ones that feels very competitive, one of the ones that we were a little bit more on the fence about when it came to Buffalo versus VESPA. There's very good reason. I think it's been on display very well.
We're back here in the game on the live client. See a bit of a disconnect. We are going to see a pause on the game. Don't worry, that is not your screen's glitching. That is just what happens sometimes when we have this spectator pause and what happens in the client as we are getting through this game. But looks like Go-To, again, did get executed, unfortunately, to the Baron. And that's just kind of the state that we're in right now. He's respawned back on the map, Dragon spawning in 45 seconds.
Easy enough. And now, I suppose also, like, I'm looking for where the positioning is of everybody on Buffalo, because you still have Emprisonner on one side of the map with TP. Kha'Zix is on the bottom side with a lot more pushing power than what normally would be there if it were Emprisonner on the bottom side into the Ornn, who's trying to actually get there. So the wave is going to get caught by Kha'Zix. It's going to get shoved a lot further than Butterfan's going to want it to be here in the next 25 seconds. And Kha'Zix actually full backing, with just wanting the ability to hold Butterfan in place so that he can get back out after buying an item after this. It looks like it's a Caulfield. He just finished that. No package yet. We'll see if that timer actually shows up. Because he also has TP. He could wait a TP into a fight if the package is within just a couple of seconds. And you can see Prisoner actually is also roamed down. Not going to TP from the top lane. Instead, going to be here readily available for the fight. Maybe this is the play. Maybe they're waiting for a package or something here for the Corki.
It'd be sole point if Buffalo end up, you know, giving this one away to VESPA, but they are going to be the ones to start this one up. Hex deck number 2 started. Kha'Zix roaming down. I believe he does actually have that package. Bowling ball will go wide. Package onto Kha'Zix. Dragon at 4k HP. The battle lines has been drawn. What will the result of this fight be? Goto gonna go forward. Doesn't get the steal. And will get instantly deleted as the Dragon gets secured. Donnie shot over the top. It will be a trade as Emprisonner ends up falling as well. Lilton Lullaby coming out. Slowing down the back line. And here comes the watch out. Derty doing a whole lot of damage. And he'll get devoured and stay alive for now. Big steering charge over the top though is that's Butterfan coming up huge with the crowd control. At the end of the day, it is 4 dead for Buffalo, 3 dead for VESPA, and they lose the Dragon but end up winning out on the fight.
A wash in the kind of grand scheme of things, because again, you're back to even Dragon state for a team that really wants to be able to push some of this early game. You do have Ornn items on the way, and you still have scaling in your Viktor and Jinx. You can see the range isn't as much of a problem as maybe I had anticipated it being over the course of this. The Viktor was able to put damage in the right place, and even with a package, it was really, really big influence. I want to see what happens to that, because I didn't actually catch. First off was the jump in from the Kha'Zix, which didn't end up getting a steal. I think it dropped to like 50 health or something like that right here.
Oh,
80 health right there. I want to see where the package went. It was almost a nice hook right there that came through. But the big thing was that Derty flashing over the wall, getting into the backline was just astonishing to be able to put in a bunch of damage into these members. This is the guy that pulled all this additional gold on the Lillia pick, being able to put pressure into FutureSelf and Blame One. The problem is neither goes down off those picks. A nice DCC coming through from Butterfan means that there's nobody to follow up on the other side of the fight, and it means that they end up walking out the back, almost you know, against what you would imagine from Derty having gotten that big of an amazing flank into the back line to be able to put out damage like that. Again, it's a system where, like, to me, that was inches that Buffalo was short of actually just full capping that fight if the Lillia gets the cleanup on the back line, one more item, something like that. But we're not quite there yet. There's still breathing room for VESPA to be able to have inside of fights where they don't just get erased by 1 Q from Lillia in the back line.
Oh man, he's going for the assassination, but there's so many members of Buffalo around. If his life comes forward, the root will land. Now Izumi forced to try and disengage here with the depth charge. But here comes Goto again, popping that invisibility. Teleport coming in from Butterfan, and the Ornn will be unleashed. Only knocking up Nyeong for now, but FutureSelf is here to dish out the damage. Fight, nobody's falling just yet. Watch Goto though, he's looking for the aggression. He wants to go for the assassination attempts. Steering charge does land in onto 2. Kyriu getting knocked up and over the wall. Big damage, big healing go coming out from Buffalo as Emprisonner is just too big. And look at the lilting lullaby knocking up 2. That's the ultimate from the backside. Blamed One forced to flash away. Kyriu got his killing spree. A double onto Kha'Zix, and Blamed One will fall as well. A clean ace for University of Buffalo, and they will get the Baron as well.
And a big problem with this team fight from VESPA is that they've got big engagement tools, but for the most part, they are kind of a let's punch really hard at the beginning and see what sticks, right? You throw an Ornn ultimate into the mix, you throw a Kha'Zix, you get resets for Jinx, all of a sudden the remainder of the fight looks good. You can start dropping rockets into this backline and putting out damage against Buffalo's comp, who doesn't have a bunch of members to soak that other than the Tahm Kench. The problem is, all of their resources are burned so quickly in this fight and get basically nothing. Here's the ultimate, where's the follow-up? There is nothing. No ultimates have been burned so far. That's Ornn's ultimate down. Jinx's ultimate had been burned just before this, and there's not much for them to do. They funnel into a choke point where all of a sudden, Aatrox, Corki rockets, Lillia, they live for you being able to be in close proximity with one another, and it leads to a situation in which you can see what happens, the cleanup of the fight from the combination of both the Lilting Lullaby and Emprisonner himself probably would have wiped 2-3 members off the face of the earth even if they had no backup. Not to mention, again, the range at the end of this one makes it so hard to run away. 5-man sweep, Buffalo takes their first really super convincing fight win of the entire game, nets themselves Baron, and nets themselves an 8k gold advantage. Again, Dragons, if it's sole point for VESPA, they might still have a lot of breathing room. They might still have this ability to show up and come back in a game like this, but they have got to pray that Buffalo can't take advantage of this, cannot push this advantage to a state where there is no comeback from VESPA.
And we talked about how the engage from Vespa had to be, in the hands of Butterfan and Izumi, but when it's just, the Kha'Zix running into a choke point against a Lillia and a Corki and an Aatrox and a Senna and a Tahm Kench, I mean, it's just so hard for them to do anything. And you saw they unleashed all their spells, but when they got to that stage in the fight where Buffalo tried to turn things around, really just didn't have much left in the tank.
No, they did not. And now Buffalo just trying to crack all the outer ring of that. You can see Aatrox is getting ganked from the bottom side, but there's 4 members here ready to go on the top side.
Ultimate coming over as well. It is a
alive.
2v1. Yeah, there's the World Ender. Somehow Emprisonner is still alive. Has so much healing with the Gore Drinker and the Death Stance as well. It's going to be really hard to take him down. Goto has to be so careful. The Bell's Breath has been popped. Emprisonner using that stopwatch. Even if he goes down, it is just so much time that Buffalo is buying here with their top laner who's trying to turn back in onto Goto. He will eventually fall as Butterfan lands the final blow. But now Inhibitor Turret under fire. Cannon Minion doing so much work with the Baron buff. 4 members of Buffalo looking to crack open the base of Vespa.
Oh no, okay, Flame Boy got hit by E, that's gonna
Here
be
we
the
go.
goal.
That's the ultimate. That's the signal for them to go in. Nice cancel there with a depth charge, but the health bars are ticking too low, and Blade 1 goes down before the fight even begins. A double kill into the hands of Canas, and now Butterfan is here, but what can he do to defend the base of his team? Inhibitor in the top side goes down. They are waiting for the wave to crash in. Only Emprisonner is down. No teleport available on him if the respawns end up coming through. Butterfan has to go for something. Goto gonna get locked up here by the Abyssal Dive. It will be Nyeong eventually going down, and now the re-engage might come through here for Vespa. And it looks like Buffalo just going to back away. Not going for the end just yet because they know they're in a very good spot to finish it in just a couple of minutes.
They are fantastic position to find themselves in if they're here. This is the one kind of last-ditch effort coming through from Vespa after all of this massive sequence where you have, of course, bottom lane they go after Emprisonner. This is really bad, actually. Yeah, they're really hoping you can finish this. But even if they catch Goto, they could just block it. No!
Canasti!
Where is your smite Goto?
He smited at 5k HP. Why did he do that?
Oh, he was just trying to rush it. He didn't think anyone was there. They crossed from the topside jungle. They didn't have a wave. They didn't have a ward. They had no way of knowing. Oh, it's so tragic.
Oh, God. There was that. There was a couple missed 50-50s at the Dragon Pit. Of course, the executed the Baron Pit. Goto, I think you can chalk this one up to unlucky, maybe. RBM, don't flame him too hard. Just a couple of unfortunate circumstances that the coin flipped the other way. Maybe it's a little bit of a different story. But for now, definitely Vespa, losing on top of another loss there with the Dragon going over. Now soul point for UBuffalo. Gold lead at about 10k, and this is kind of the start of stage in the game where the scaling is starting to come through really heavily. 4 items now in Canas with that Void Staff completed. 3 onto Derty as well, and so it's just really hard to move this Buffalo composition here, Rebel.
Whenever you see a Senna that has matched the itemization of an opposing bottom laner, you know there's a problem in the game when it's not farming, right? This Tahm Kench is already hard enough to kill. The Senna's in a great place where the poke damage comes through. And Derty fishing with some of these Lillia, the E's coming out, it's just... If you get hit, it feels like the fight's over. When you either run away and try not to die to the ultimate coming through, or they just ult you anyway, and it doesn't matter. Not to mention, Canas now on Void Staff means the poke is coming through. They're trying to force on bottom lane.
Yeah.
Canas
Trying to go right through the chokehold. Ornn lands onto 2, and Nyeong will be the first casualty in this fight. Derty forcing to pop that zonies, but he will likely go down after that. Big shutdown, and now Blamebone has been unlocked. Picking up another kill, and the resets are coming in. Kyriu has to flash away, but he'll go down as well. A shutdown onto the Senna, and the Rocket finishes the job! A triple kill onto Blamedone, and Vespa stay alive in this game.
And a perfect pull for Vespa right here in a number of different situations. First one, bottom side pull to be able to start this engagement off, and the cutoff angle for Goto. Yeah, this is what I was looking at, because if Canas gets back with the package, that's a really big angle for him to be able to enter this fight, put in damage, and it's difficult to force your way forward. But because Goto cut off his angle to reinforce this fight, it meant that there was no way for the Corki to get there in time. And so every member that got peeled away from Buffalo was just less armor for this damage to actually work with. Incredible thought process right there from Goto. I know Peyton's going to try to have some words with him, but yeah, that was at least a very, very solid decision to be able to push off Canas from that fight. And a great fight call right there, splitting the Corki onto the other side, not having that consistent poke damage. Just means that they were down a good amount of what they were able to accomplish. That forced ultimate into Derty meant that he was able to get into the backline and have that same effect on the Lillia that he has most of the game.
And that's kind of how Vespa can still stay alive. They have the scaling. If Buffalo is forced to go into you, and you have this sort of numbers advantage with Canas trying to push on the other side, that's when you pull the trigger. You try to get one reset, and now you have Blamed One, who has that Wormfall and Sacrifice as well to try and just get the resets in and do a lot of damage. But now Vespa has to be careful. Butterfan might get locked in, forced to flash away from the W of Kyriu.
Ooh, that's a fast Baron.
And now Buffalo going to try to start up his Baron. So much damage on this side.
Jinx is so far away as well. You have to use the Hextech portals to get here in time, but I actually don't know that even that is going to be enough for Jinx.
Go to.
Here,
He's going to go over. Can he get the steal? He's going to go over, but it's not secured. Canas landing the final blow. But again, watch the resets. Blamed One has to flash away. He's still left relatively untouched in this fight. The side of Vespa can do a whole lot of damage. Go does end up falling, but the hook's gonna come through. But look at all the damage coming out from Canas. He's the main carry in this game. He's gonna valk forward, pick up another kill, make it a triple onto the Corki. Butterfan popping the stopwatch to just buy a couple more seconds in this game. But Derty finishes off the ace. Buffalo get the Baron. Buffalo will take game 1 of this series.
And that is that. We talked about it, the possibility of the range being such a difficult thing to deal with. Buffalo can't break through the front line. You start with Derty, he gets pulled out by Nyeong, and then you replace him with Emprisonner, and you got the pick onto Kyriu, which is a bit of the healing that you had, so that fight would have looked even worse if you don't find the pick onto Senna. But the damage in the back is enough from just Canas to carry the entirety of the fight. Incredible from Buffalo. You slow down the dragon stacking, you get the gold advantage to kick things off, and you have more range to work with in the later game. I think Vespa put up their hands, they threw a couple punches, they did some good things, but Buffalo ultimately, again, that team cohesion we talk about, being able to make very good decisions in certain situations. Yes, they had a couple of rough moments, but goodness gracious, being able to come together like that in team fights constantly and put pressure into especially the backliners of Vespa, kind of incredible to watch again and again.
Rebel, did we mention that this is just the first game of the Collegiate Championship?
Yes, just game 1.
We had a couple of base defenses, an execute at Baron. So much stuff happened in that game, and we have so much more action to cover throughout the season, but it is Buffalo holding true after getting that early advantage. They go up 1-0 in this best of 3, and it's up for Vesta to try and fight back. Gonna take a short break. When we return, the desk will be here. Oh, sorry, apologies, everybody. We're going right to the desk after this game number 1. Let's see what Dylan and the gang have to think about that one.
Welcome back, everybody. Your lovely desk is back. What a game 1! I mean, that was actually really exciting. It felt like a lot of us thought it was going to be 2-0, and sure, it's a 1 game up, but I really did think that game would not be as close as it was. Let's start our discussion with game 1 talking about the draft, because I do think that some interesting picks happened for both teams, most notably the Kha'Zix. RBM, I want to start with you, my friend. As a Kha'Zix enthusiast yourself, how do you feel like it slots into this draft?
Yeah, I mean, Vespa really had like a god draft going. Like Jinx, Ornn, and Collegiate are free wins, like because the comps are so easy to play. And then Kha'Zix has a pretty good matchup in the Lillia if you don't do exactly what GoTo just did that game. So as long as he gets a good matchup again, it doesn't just decide to grief the entire game, then it'll be a really good save this time around with a better draft.
Just a little bit harsh, I appreciate the criticism. You're not one to shy away from it. TJ, how do you feel about this draft overall for game 1?
I think it was really interesting. Jungle was saved for later pick for both teams. Buffalo banned Rengar Tryndamere, the 2 really interesting picks. I second the statement by RBM. Jinx Ornn is kind of god draft. Imagine they picked Viego too. Like, oh my god, you can't lose.
Yeah, that would have definitely been a spicy one for sure. I think Viego had some pop-off potential. Let's take a look at actually how the game unfolded itself. Let's take a look at some of these clips. Our first replay that we have to dive into is something that happened right at the start of the game, so about 30 minutes ago, and it's actually a very interesting one. It's where Goto goes into the enemy jungle trying to make something happen early on the Kha'Zix, and it doesn't really go his way.
So in this replay, we have never before seen jungle pathing of Goto doing full bottom side clear into enemy top side jungle. Takes a leap of faith, literally blind. Maybe didn't read the patch notes that Lillia is now super healthy on clear. And unfortunately, this is just a giant flip. Enemy collapses, Kha'Zix dies, and this is really well played by red side. It does result in a potentially game-losing situation for Goto. Obviously, Vespa came back and was able to push the game forward. But this is something where you're really like, dang, how do you come back from this? If from here, Red side then pushes into enemy top side jungle, and then denies all three of those camps. It becomes nearly impossible for the Kha'Zix to play the game. After this, they should immediately go back to enemy second Raptor respawn. And then Kha'Zix will lose all of his bot side again. And then finally, as soon as Red buff and Raptors are respawning a third time, Red can just play for that respawn as well. If this situation were to occur, Kha'Zix is extremely sad, and maybe this is why RBM thinks Kha'Zix is absolutely an unplayable champion and jungle is weak. But he was able to come back a little bit. So here was an interesting sequence, and it's very rare, I think, to see a team capitalize in that way. But if that does happen in future situations, Red would have won every single time.
Yeah, I mean, that 3 cap into enemy something cap, trying to figure out which one she's on and trying to fight her to the death was absolutely grief. That's how you ruin jungle game right there. Because, I mean, Lillia did make it to second Raptor, thankfully. Unfortunately, she didn't even get all of them. The Kha'Zix got the big one and a few of the small ones still. Lillia held her smite for next game or something. So, it was pretty... It ended up not being game over, but it should be game over. Like, once... Like, if you int it that bad, the game is, like, super doomed. But thankfully, we had the Collegiate God comp, we had the scaling tools, so we're able to come back despite our own individual efforts.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of an interesting play to start the game off. I really did think it would just swing from there and go straight in UBuffalo's favor. But our second clip is a team fight that happened near the Baron where Goto has another interesting play. RBM, I'm going to let you try to explain this Kha'Zix engage for me.
Okay, we're new to playing as Senna TK or something, because it got disabled for 3 weeks or 2 weeks or something, so we forgot what they did, and we tried to one-shot the Senna, do 200 damage to her, since our build is also really no damage build, but it's like super good for our Jinx to play. And then once we wasted all of our tools, the fight is over. But not for VESPA. The fight is never over for them. So we just continue to click forward and kill ourselves to lose the game because Collegiate's awesome.
Absolutely pristine analysis work, RBM. This is why we have you on the desk. This is honestly why we have you on the desk. But yeah, I mean, definitely, you know, as a VESPA fan, it felt like the game was pretty close up until that point. Sure, things weren't exactly going their favor, but they did just have a really good team fight around the dragon that we didn't clip. But I mean, it felt like that was an unneeded fight, and it really doesn't, you know, feel like it needed to happen. But RBM, you have something else you'd like to say?
Yeah, I mean, once you grief like your Ornn ult and like you waste all your engaged tool, Kha'Zix has leaped out. You gotta like know when to cut your wins and cut your losses in Collegiate, and a lot of teams are really, really, really bad at that. And this was definitely showcasing VESPA being really, really, really bad at that because we decided to just keep going forward and own our entire team.
We're ragging a little bit on VESPA here. The next clip is actually extremely impressive. And they did, I think, come out of the gate swinging. It definitely was not as we predicted, where it was just going to be like, it's just kind of a clean 2-0. So I think well played by them to come out strong. And that doesn't mean that they're out at all. Here in this final clip, we see that, you know, Jinx from Arcane is currently present on the screen. She gets 1 kill, turns into an AC 130. She doesn't need 11 like in Call of Duty. And Blue is just able to take over the game. Or rather this fight. Jinx obviously looks super impressive. They're just able to play it front to back, and Kanasa's pretty sad getting hit here by this final rocket. Unfortunately, it obviously wasn't enough to win the game, but I think if they execute like this in team fights, play around their win conditions, don't waste too much, keep flashes up, all that kind of stuff, then I think VESPA becomes a contender for the series.
So, question for you guys. Do you guys think that if a similar draft happens for both teams, VESPA plays a little bit cleaner in the early game, that they could actually, you know, have a chance in this second game? How do you feel about that?
Definitely. If Goto doesn't grief the entire game, like for 7 minutes straight, that game is a free win. Like it was so free. So I think they have a really good idea of how to draft, how to play. We're gonna scale. We're gonna play slow. Just don't run it down. Don't flip the game on a 3 camp invade in a matchup where you win at level 6. Yeah. I think overall that's it's definitely winnable.
That is definitely one of those games you look back and you kind of like kick yourself. You're like, guys, we really could have won that one. And so I think that should actually be maybe even like a confidence booster for them, because I think VESPA kind of achieved what they wanted to with their season. At least they got out of their conference. They're here placing, and they may not win it all, but they definitely want to put up a strong showing for sure. And I think this is a game where they can say, hey guys, we really did deserve to be here. We are a good team. We can take games off of these types of teams.
Yeah, I'm jumping on that point because it is actually a huge morale boost because we got completely destroyed by Maryville in North Finals. after that third game, we were like, maybe we're not completely doomed if we ever have to play them again, right? So try to take your losses and be like, we know what we did wrong, we know what went bad, fix it for the next game, and we got a series on our hands.
Yeah, and the best part about that is that game one was not even that much of a stomp, right? It was a game that went pretty long. We saw some really good team fights and mechanics shown from the side of VESPA, so certainly a world in which similar drafts could have a different result for the second game. Gentlemen, we have about 50 seconds left. Final thoughts on game two adjustments and, going into this second game, VESPA versus UBuffalo.
I'm excited to see if UBuffalo continues to ban the Tryndamere and the Rengar. I think that opens up a lot of pretty interesting possibilities if they don't. I expect it to stay banned. And I do think that VESPA, if they continue to draft something around like a Jinx, something around scaling, they might be able to punish the fact that Canas, who, if we didn't say it formally, is You Look So Charming, he does tend to play these scaling mages. We saw that Viktor was up 20 CS on him in lane. That's an impressive performance. And so if UBuffalo continues to draft kind of a late game comp, maybe VESPA also drafts that, there is potential to win, and it's not just like, GG.
Yeah, definitely going to be an interesting game to keep our eyes on. The timer is ticking down. Rebel and Grapes take us into game two.
Thank you very much, Dylan, and the rest of the desk for breaking down that game. Rebel, it was pretty crazy, all back and forth. We were putting Buffalo as like the sort of 2-0 favorites in this series, but VESPA gonna try to make it interesting here as we head into game two.
Yeah, if they can replicate a lot of the successes they had and kind of minimize a couple of the mistakes, I think this is more than competitive. I think Vespa's outright going to be able to take a game off of Buffalo as well, especially with some of the early laning. I don't think going as well for Buffalo as I had anticipated walking into a series like this. Now that could all change on the drop of a hat as well. We don't know what Buffalo is going to be fixing for a game like this, because you can imagine they doubled back and they looked at some of the things that they did wrong as well, and hopefully they're able to fix that up as well, because neither team was absolutely flawless in that last one. It's just about what they're able to bring out for game number two now.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that Virginia Tech can look at in terms of how to come back here and even up this series at game two. We mentioned GoTo as one of the players that really had to get ahead if Vespa wanted to win. He didn't have necessarily the best game, lost a couple of smites, had a couple of unfortunate deaths, got caught out a little bit more. And so maybe if he's able to get a little bit more power early on into the game, instead of falling down to Derty's Lillia very early on, could be another angle for them to get back in. And you saw the potential for the team fighting of Vespa to get there. Blainebone had a phenomenal team fight there on the Jinx. FutureSelf putting in work on the Viktor as well. So if you're in a slightly better state versus a team like Buffalo that fights so well, maybe you are in a position that you can steal the game.
Be nice to see that kind of thing. Especially, I think the thing they were missing a lot for the Kha'Zix was, well, that early invade was a little bit troll. I think our desk covered that more than enough. But if you have support from your lanes as well, like with laners that aren't just going to be like ambiently still or ambiently usually not moving in the slightest compared to what their opponent is going to, you have ways to attack a lot better. Oftentimes it's out of mid lane that I'm paying attention to that, but the Viktor was so good. I'm actually more pressed to think that like top lane you might want something that can push out better, or bottom lane you want something that has more control. Specifically just in the lane to lane, so you can go looking for kind of interactions in that way rather than anything else.
Yeah, lots of boxes to maybe check off if you are Vespa. Unfortunately, having a couple of issues getting into the draft for game number two. So we're going to take a short break. Be right back with Pick Ban as soon as possible.